I'm Chris Stewart, creator of Treats and Beasts, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Chris Stewart about his new book, Treats for Beasts. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Chris is a Canadian artist and writer. His initial training was in animation, which led to working at an animation studio, honing his skills as an artist, editor, and photographer. During that time, Chris also started a fun website dedicated to his love of candy. The website candycritic.org offers insight and reviews of candy from around the world. His latest book is entitled Treats for Beasts. Treats for Beasts is described as a fun book featuring a collection of illustration of animals and candy for each letter of the alphabet. Each letter features a beautiful drawing of a beast eating a treat that starts with that particular letter of the alphabet. The book is perfect for kids, teens, or even grown-ups. It helps if you happen to love animals and enjoy eating treats. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Chris Stewart about his new book, Treats for Beasts. So, Chris Stewart, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I appreciate your time. Before we get started with the questions, I want to ask you what's on your bedside reading table. What are you reading today?
What I'm reading right now, I'm actually reading Love and Rockets.
Oh, yeah.
I was inspired. It's one of those books that a lot of people have talked about. Like you have to read it. You have to read it. It was when I sort of started reading comics, it wasn't quite at my level, and then I just sort of missed it for some reason. It was never on my radar. I always knew it existed, but I never bought it, and so I finally got a digital version of it, and I've been reading through it, and I'm really enjoying it. I love the style, and I love the weirdness of the stories.
Yeah, it's definitely a seminal classic. I think people will go back to it in years to come, just the way they would do with Scott Pilgrim. It's part of a sort of a time frame that we go back to. So that's cool. There you go. Let's talk about your new book, Treats and Beasts. Can you describe that book and maybe talk a wee bit about what inspired you to make it?
Sure. Treats and Beasts is an alphabet book. It's an alphabet book that, as I said, I think I describe it, it's the beasts and the treats they love. And so basically it's for every letter of the alphabet, there's a beast and a treat, and it sort of describes them eating that particular treat. So like Rachel the raccoon ravages rhubarb custards and things like that. So
I was going to ask you, that's quite unique. I mean, I have seen other people do other alphabets, but that's what inspired you to make it, I guess, would be my next question.
Well, I mean, my love of candy critic. I eat a lot of candy. If you guys have heard the last episode I was on before, you'll know that I'm a huge candy sort of sweet tooth fanatic, and I love candy for more than just eating sugar, but it's also like the aesthetics and the fun and the history and everything about that. So I sort of had this idea of like, I've always wanted to do an alphabet book, and I always figured animals were an important part of it, but I always sort of had a hard time figuring out what would be sort of I wanted to do an alphabet book with animals, but I was like, what would be the second part? And it actually sort of it almost hit me in a weird way. It's like, well, I know a lot about candy, and I know a lot about sweets, and that's sort of my thing. So it's like, why not animals eating candy? Like it sounds silly, but it kind of works, and it's kind of in my wheelhouse. And so, I mean, to some degrees, I did it because I thought it would be easy. It wasn't as easy as I thought. But on the other hand, it was just sort of something that I knew that, it was a subject matter I like, and it was weird enough that I figured it would be kind of entertaining for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I saw a review that compared your book to Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are. So I want to ask you, is that a fair comparison?
I'm going to say, that I don't know if I want to be compared to that classic a piece of literature. That's like, right. Like, a comic book artist being compared to Jack Kirby. And it's like, it's one of those goals that maybe I wish I could get up to, but it's weird. I can understand where it came from in that it's weird. It's the beasts in it are sort of related to, monsters in a way. I mean, they are animals, but they are sort of like this. They're sort of regular animals put in a surreal situation, which I think, with Where the Wild Things Are, that is sort of, it's about the boy who's a monster who's put in a sort of surreal situation, whether or not it's in his imagination or not. I guess, that's up to the interpretation of the reader, but it's definitely a flattering comparison, I would say.
Sure. Alphabet books, the first thing you think of, oh, this is directed at children. But is that true? Would that be the direct audience that you've aimed this book for?
Definitely not. Everything I do, I try and make it children friendly, in that, I try not to swear. I try not to, I keep it within comic code, I guess would be the best language in this particular podcast. But I don't write it for children at all. I mean, I write it for myself first. That's something that I've learned being in any kind of creative field, is you have to do it so you enjoy it first, particularly with your own projects, or else, what's the point? So I think I wrote it so kids can enjoy it. So if they come across it, they're not going to hate it. And I've actually had a couple of reviews. I've had a couple of videos sent to me from little kids telling me how much they loved it. And it was one of the most flattering things. But I like the idea that, maybe somebody might have this on their coffee table, ironically, and be like an alphabet book, and then they read it, and you see the weirdness in it is sort of suits, I think, adults as well.
Cool. I want to ask you about your creative process. What tools you use to create this specific book?
Sure. As far as like down to the drawing, I'm a pen and ink, and I do sort of blue pencil. I'm an animator by training, so I do blue pencil start first, just because I don't even know why I do that anymore, but it's just habit nowadays, where I sort of do my roughs in a blue, go in, ink it up. I tend to use just sort of, almost whatever I have around me. I think in this particular case, I used some Sharpie markers and Sharpie pens. A lot of Sharpie stuff in this particular one. There's a lot of cross hatching in it and everything like that. So I'm really old fashioned. I use, it's paper and ink and pencil to start. Afterwards, one of the things I do, I honestly don't own a scanner. And I've created a method of coloring and scanning using, I'm a photographer as well. So I actually photograph everything I do, and then sort of adjust it in Photoshop and such to make it, work well. So I will photograph the black and white image, adjust it to sort of how I like it, and then I'll go in and color it digitally in Photoshop. But part of the thing about the photography too is it gives it a little bit of a rough gray, like a slight gray on it, and it kind of gives it a little bit of there's a few imperfections in the paper that you can kind of see, and I like that feeling. Like, I don't like it to be this super sharp, scanned, clean line for this particular project anyways. So I actually keep the gray. I actually keep the sort of the non-perfect white. So the gray is actually on a layer on top of everything. And I use it as sort of a multiply, for all you Photoshop people out there, who I use a multiply layer with the paper, so that there's a sort of actually a bit of that rough texture. I never use pure whites anywhere in it, because I don't want that sort of stark, black white. I kind of want the grays and the yellows from the paper a little bit.
Ah, okay. Now, you mentioned that this was more of a challenge than you originally thought. Can you identify what that was?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you the one thing: the letter X is very hard to write in any alphabet book.
Right. Yeah.
So that was a challenge for sure. I didn't realize that I would enjoy drawing animals as much as I did, and that took a bit of a warm-up period. I spent a few months just drawing in my sketchbook, sort of drawing animals in the sort of pen and ink style that I'm used to, because I'm kind of used to doing, either sort of cartoon characters and things like that. The last series that I did, which was Snack Facts, was definitely more sort of cartoony and a little bit more sort of surrealish. But I wanted this to look a little bit more realistic and a lot more cross-hatching. So there was a lot more warm-up to sort of learning how to draw animals. But by the time I was done, I actually found that I really enjoyed it, and it became, the style and everything sort of became something that I really enjoyed. But there was a lot more warm-up. And again, there were certain letters of the alphabet that were very challenging.
Right. Now, I noticed on your Twitter feed, and you just mentioned it, you have a micro collection of comics based called Snack Facts, and you've just compiled them into a single volume. I wonder if you could just remind those people who are listening what that series is all about.
Sure. Snack Facts is a collection of micro comics. There's 13 comics altogether. It goes from issue 0 to issue 12, and it's basically about two characters, Sir Francis Sweetums and Barbara, who travel back in time and learn all about candy history and snack history and little facts about snacks as they travel back in time in their magical tuk-tuk. And Sir Francis Sweetums is sort of this old-timey explorer, and Barbara, his associate, is a sugar glider that has magic sugar that comes off of her that allows them to travel through time. And they learn all about sort of the history of snacks and everything like that. And I created a series of comic books that you can kind of fold yourself out of one sheet of paper and sort of make, so it's almost like a pocket size, almost the size of a business card when it's all folded up and everything like that. But I had a few people sort of ask about, they like the art and everything like that, and they just thought that it was kind of small, and they were wondering if I would ever do like almost an artist edition. So I created sort of a graphic novel size artist edition. So each page is actually close to what I actually drew it at. And again, it was inspired off of Treats and Beasts, where I photographed it and sort of left some of the imperfections in the scans as well. And so it kind of, I feel it's a little more authentic, and I actually I like that a little bit more. So with the rough edges, and maybe you see some of the pencil lines and stuff like that.
Nice. Now, because you're constantly reviewing candies on your site, Candy Critic, I want to ask you and put you on the spot here now. What's your favorite current candy?
My favorite current candy right now. That is always the hard question. I think I said this last time I was on. My favorite thing is always something I've never tried before or something interesting. But the last thing that I ate that I was like, this was amazing. I got this into the States recently. I went on a road trip to the States, which right now there's a bunch of reviews from that road trip going online. But I tried their Girl Guide Thin Mint pretzels.
So pretzels. I haven't heard of those.
Yeah, so basically it's like a Thin Mint cookie like you get from the Girl Guides, like that's from the American version of them. But instead of using a cookie, they use a pretzel. So you get this nice sort of salty, sweet thing, but with like a hint of mint in it as well. They're surprisingly good. I ate a giant Costco-sized bag of them, I think, in a week, and it was fantastic.
Wow. Yeah, that's something maybe will come up to Canada soon, but it's quite unique, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Good stuff. For people who want to find out about your books and your reviews and all that stuff, where do you recommend they go online to find you and find out what you're coming up with in the future?
Sure. The number one place to go is go to candycritic.org. You can find links to all of my social media there. On Twitter @CandyCritic. I'll actually give you a little bit of a preview of something I'm working on. I've actually got another project on the go, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah, please.
I'm working on a game. So I have this idea for a game, and I want to design a game, and it involves cupcakes. So right now, there's a lot of drawings and sketches of cupcakes that I'm posting online as sort of an additional drawing thing. So if you go to candycritic.org, check out my social media. You'll definitely find links to be able to buy all of the books and everything like that. And you'll also find I'm doing all kinds of little video projects with these books. But if you kind of look between the lines, every once in a while, you're going to start to see lots of drawings of cupcakes. And that's going to lead to a game that I'm working on. I don't want to say anything else about it because it's in its infancy still. But if you like drawings of cupcakes, it's a perfect time to come visit me.
Cool. Well, Chris, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview?
You know what? I support local comic books. One of the things that's actually inspired me in the last couple of years and what's made me be a bit more of a maker is a lot of local comic books in Canada, a lot of comic book makers. There's been a few in the States as well, but I have a few friends that were doing it that started back up. Just coming through that, and podcasts like this are really great for this sort of thing too, because it's how you discover a lot of this stuff. So it's amazing how inspiring that sort of thing can be, because you realize that, maybe the little errors and the flaws in your art, just again, as I said earlier, you can't be Jack Kirby. It's nice to know that, there's just a certain amount of inspiration. Everybody else is going through that same thing where they also realize they can't be Jack Kirby, but they can still make something. And just having that sort of support and just seeing that, even if you don't make contact with those people, just hearing about it and then going out and reading these books from all these people. Again, Canada's a great place to start with that. There's so much cool content here, and it's really worth checking out.
Thanks to Chris for the chat. You can discover more about Chris on Twitter @CandyCritic and online at candycritic.org. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter @TrueNorthComics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True Earth Country Comics Podcast is copyright True Earth Country Comics, copyright 2022.